Hi, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. It is the day after. This is Mike, the Erudite DM, and I had a really good Thanksgiving with my family. My kids are older, and one of them hosted us. We had a great time. So I hope yours was good as well, and you got to see some friends or some family. If not, I hope you're playing a an RPG soon, like Shadowdark. I know I will be. In fact, going to be playing on Monday night, and we're going to play the second session with Shadow Rim, which is the Skyrim version by Chubby Funster for Shadowdark. So come take a look at that at 6 p.m. Central on Monday night on this channel, this very place, this very YouTube spot, and you can check us out. It'd be a lot of fun. It was fun last week, even though I got killed. I got to be honest. I got a little too aggressive. It was my fault. So, lesson learned about being greedy. I guess greed can pay off, but it didn't pay off in that instance. Anyway, all that aside, the reason we're here is to talk a little bit more and probably wrap up the weapon series that I started with the first weapon, which was the Falchion. And I've corrected, I say corrected the spelling. There's more than a dozen different spellings based on Latin and German and Dutch and French, several on French. In English as well, but I didn't add an H into the spelling. So Falchion, I was using it without the H. Anyway, minor point, but I'm going to share my screen. And what happened is in the first two videos, I proposed an idea for this first weapon of the series, the Falchion, which is this heavy chopping type blade that was used in the 100 Years' War, through the War of the Roses and other parts of Europe. And then I got a lot of feedback from some of the regulars and some new folks who were following the channel. Thank you, by the way, for the subscriptions. Thank you for the likes. Thanks for sharing it with your gaming friends and so forth. It was really fun. I got great feedback, and I got some great ideas about let's balance this thing. Maybe it's too much this, it's too much that. What if we added a negative? So I kind of went through all that feedback, and I came up with some ideas. And let me share my screen with you, and I'll show you where I landed. This does not mean it's the end of it one way or another, but this is what I'm going to suggest. And actually, you can find this PDF I'm going to show you is now live on eruditedm.com, which is a WordPress blog. It's my website that I run, so you can download it there for free. I might put it on drive through at some point, but who knows? Might play it for a couple of months, and then might change it. Might change it again. So I hope you can see that well enough. Let me see if I can make this just a scooch larger for you to view. That looks a little bit better. This image over here is actually from Wikipedia on the right side, which is kind of cool. That's an Italian Falchion. And here's the thing about Falchions that we've all learned in the last few videos and in the reading I've been doing. There are so many variants. The weapon was popularized in the 14th century in the 100 Years' War, in the first part of that war, and it grew in popularity and was used throughout France and in all theaters within the 100 Years' War. But it was also used in Italy. It was also used in Switzerland and in Germany, in the Low Countries and so forth. So it's a very popular weapon for about 300 years, and it shifts over time. It is used primarily by infantry, by soldiers, by mercenaries, by lower classes, because it was very practical as a close-in combat infantry melee weapon for striking and bludgeoning and hitting, but also chopping at the same time. It is not an elegant, graceful weapon, but it might be used in place of, it's often mentioned side by side with something like a warhammer, and other, or mace, other heavy, knights and so forth, when they got on, especially dismounted on foot in these medieval battles, they very often did not have the space of the room to wield a long sword or a long type weapon like that. So when they were pressed in closely against, especially other heavily mounted knights, they needed smashing and bashing weapons, right? That they could cause a lot of damage close in and personal. So here's what I came up with. And right from the PDF, I'm just going to scan through this and read it for you. A one-handed, single-edged sword, usually with a slightly curved blade, popular from the 13th to 16th centuries in Western Europe. The falchion was roughly 40 inches in length, and many variants existed. Sometimes you'll see it with the pointy tip on the end. Sometimes it's a little more blunted and rounded off, or just straight across at the end. Again, depends on the quality of the weapon. But the thing it has in common is it's almost only one single edge on one side and the other side is flat of the blade, unlike an arming sword or a finely made long sword that a knight or a nobleman would carry, where it's a double-edged blade with a fine tip and well crafted. So there are some instances of knights or nobles who preferred a falchion as a second or third weapon when they got into these foot melee situations. But for the most part, it's a poor man's or a working man's infantry type weapon. So the other thing about the falchion was heavily weighted toward the tip for bludgeoning heft. It dents, it bruises, it stuns opponents, while it's sharp enough to chop armor, especially at the joints like the knees, and at the elbows and at the wrists and at the neck, and exposed spots such as they are. But it would do a lot of damage against mail, against chain mail, as opposed to plate, and unarmored. It would cut through unarmored folks pretty rapidly. So it was versatile and it was cheap. That's your background on the falchion. And that's the important thing to realize in your Shadowdark game when you're looking through, hey, here's all the weapons that are available, and you tell your players, hey, I have a new weapon for you. Maybe you don't have the gold pieces for that. I think it's 9 gold pieces for a long sword. It could be more in a big city. Here's something you can come into for 5 to 7 gold piece range, maybe. Not going to be as fancy. It's going to need to be sharpened more often. So let me go through my bullet points here for qualities and utility. It's one-handed. That means it may be used with a shield. It takes up 1 gear slot. It costs 5 to 7 gold pieces, depending on the quality, condition, and the location, whether you're in a small village or a large city or a market town. Those will all affect the, economically what you're paying for that weapon. A brutal chopping cleaver-like sword with lower quality edge, cheaper to make than a long sword, but it breaks more easily. It is crude. Its poor quality versions are common among chaotic humanoids used by orcs, gnolls, goblins, hobgoblins, etc. Would not be surprised to see a falchion along with axes and spears and those type of weapons for, those sort of tribal humanoids. On the other hand, a weaker character type or a smaller monster, probably could use it as a two-handed sword, but no shield, because they're the smaller hands, and they probably would need both hands to use this weapon effectively and to deliver that crunch, against your opponent in combat. So halflings, goblins, kobolds, etc., those type of creatures might use it, but only as a two-handed weapon. So in combat, and this is where I landed on it in combat, landed on a D8 for damage. That's the same as a longsword. So you're saying, well, this thing's cheaper. Why wouldn't I just buy this? Well, let's go through the other bullets here. Let's finish all these for combat before you decide. It has a first strike capability, which means the first time you draw blood with it in a combat or a melee and you cause damage, you're going to have advantage on damage because presumably it's sharper, it's been well kept up to this point. And you're going to get that first shock value, that first blast from the falchion. So we're going to give you advantage on your first damage roll. Pretty impressive. You might kill your opponent, straight away, or at least hopefully roll well enough to incur higher damage. It is somewhat brittle. Brittle in that it's lower quality. It's not, I guess you'd say the tensile strength is not as high as a well-forged, fancier blade. So it will break on a critical fail of a 1 or a 2. Okay, so that increases the chance that you might lose that weapon at some point. So we're balancing that risk. You're getting some reward up front with the same damage as a long sword, and you get that initial damage advantage roll the first time you cause damage in a combat. But on the other side, there's a risk that you could lose the weapon at some point higher than other blades. So it's a risk and reward situation. And then the last thing is it does require frequent sharpening with a whetstone to receive first damage or first strike advantage. How frequent? We're going to leave that up to your GM. And someone, I think Michael at Chthonic Musings had posted, I think it was Michael, that Chubby Funster in one of his books, the Player's Companion, I think for Shadowdark, he has a Falchion in there as well. I had seen that before. I'm not sure if it does D8. I really didn't go back and look at it because I wanted him to do his thing and I was going to do my thing based on what I was reading and looking at. So I didn't want to shape my opinion one way or another. So that's the Falchion. Maybe this will wrap up this weapon. What I would like to do is to have some of you play test it either in Solo Dark or in your regular Solo Dark session. Introduce it to your players when appropriate. Maybe they find it among some scattered weapons after a combat. Maybe they find an old one that's somewhat rusty and dinged up, and one of the players needs this type of weapon. Lots of ways to do it, or they could buy it simply from a smith or an armor or somewhere along the way. But I would like you to play test it, try it out. Let me know what you think. I'm going to do the same, and then we can come back and compare notes down the line. I am going to have other weapons in this series, and like I said, this will wrap up the Falchion for now. But we can always come back to it a few weeks or a few months down the line and say, hey, remember that Falchion? Well, it was too much this or not enough that, and we'll play with it. So this is really for the diehard Shadowdark geeks who like to analyze stuff like this and add these kind of flavorful elements in your game. And I'm one of those, and I'm assuming because you're watching this, you probably are too. The last thing I will say is for, some reference on medieval combat, because, there's so much you can learn and bring into your fantasy game, whether it's Shadowdark or D&D or anything else from our own history. And this is, let me go ahead and shut this off. Stop sharing here. Because I wanted to show you this. This is, I don't know if you know the book or not. Barbara Tuchman won a Pulitzer, and this was a bestseller for her. Famous American historian from the late last century. And I think I came across this book in, I don't know if it was required reading for my medieval history course, or it was an upper level course. Had a Hungarian professor, Dr. Kostolnik. Anyway, so lots of church history, lots of wars and things like the 100 Years' War, and that's when it first popped on my radar. But I did find this book, I believe, in college or a few years after. It doesn't matter. But it is an excellent resource for you to go and learn about the world, particularly around France and wars in Italy and in England and in Scotland and in Ireland, in the Low Countries and so forth, in Spain. Fantastic information. And it's not just about those wars. You'll learn more about the Black Death than you ever wanted to know, and you'll learn more about religion and how the church was functioning at that time. And you need factions. You need warlords for your game to model them after. You want to know about the heresies of that time. You want to know about guilds like the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, who started in Italy and Switzerland. There's tons of information there. So lots of really rich stuff you could take. Add these ideas and some notes into your game. Add magic, add monsters, rinse, wash, rinse, repeat, and you're in business. So check out Barbara Tuchman's A Distant Mirror. You could probably pick it up at any used bookstore. It's been published and republished many, many times over. Probably get that, for $10 or less, I would guess, in some bookstores. So that's all I have on the Falchion. Again, this is Thanksgiving weekend. It was just yesterday, so I hope you had a good one, and we're going to talk again next week. But come see us Monday and Monday night if you're not doing anything at 6 p.m. Central, and come watch us play Shadow Rim with Chubby Funster and Better with Bacon, Death Angel Shadow, and Luke House, and some other friends. So we will be at it, and I hope to see you real soon and talk about Shadowdark some more. Thanks a lot.